Weapons is taking the world by storm. We'll dive into the secrets hidden within Zach Krieger's new film on today's video. We're more than halfway through 2025, and it has been an incredible year for the horror genre. We've already discussed some of the movies released so far, including the latest Final Destination and one of the latest Stephen King adaptations, The Monkey, but there have been so many other solid releases between Sinners, 28 years later, and Bring Her Back. However, I think the movie I've been most hyped for, thanks in part to its brilliant and mysterious marketing campaign, is the recently released Weapons. Before we go any further, I want to give a quick content warning as both the movie and this video will tackle some sensitive real-world issues. With that out of the way, today's video is focused on Weapons and discussing some of the symbolism and hidden messaging featured in the film. I also would highly recommend that you see the movie before watching further. This is a movie best experienced knowing the absolute minimum, and while it isn't necessary, seeing it in a packed theater was an incredible way to experience this roller coaster of a film. Weapons is the second film by director Zach Krieger, whose previous horror movie Barbarian took many by surprise when it dropped in 2022. Krieger was a first-time director and had a background in comedy with the sketch show Whitest Kids You Know. This is pretty evident in Barbarian, which, while suspenseful and horrific, features some great comedic moments. It offered an incredibly simple yet effective premise, becoming a surprise critical and commercial success. Shortly after the movie was released, Krieger's next screenplay, Weapons, became one of the most desired original scripts, prompting a bidding war between most of the major studios. Unlike most original films, this generated a decent amount of hype from audiences, and despite a tumultuous pre-production due to the writers and actors strike of 2023, the movie was finally released last week, receiving critical acclaim and is already financially successful after only a few days of release. After the first trailer dropped, everyone was speculating on what the supernatural element the teaser trailer was alluding to would be. The premise is simple but compelling. One day at 2:17 a.m., every single child from a third grade classroom woke up, ran out the front door, and vanished. Was this extraterrestrial, demonic? Could the marketing be subverting everyone's expectations and hiding a more human threat? Well, almost immediately the film reveals that the marketing was hiding something. All but one disappeared, and assuming you saw the movie, pretty much all the information you want to know is given to you in a compelling fashion, retelling the events from the perspective of 5 different characters before giving us the exposition through the eyes of the remaining student, Alex. It's the last 2 chapters where we learn the supernatural force at play in the movie is witchcraft being used by Alex's supposedly terminally ill Aunt Gladys. And all the questions you'd be interested in knowing from that trailer are answered pretty directly in the film itself. That how and why the kids disappeared, the rules of witchcraft, and the resolution for every character is tied up in honestly a pretty satisfying way, but there are some additional details and elements left to the audience's speculation which could expand the lore of the world that this movie exists within. The movie delivers some additional backstory visually, and you may have even noticed how frequently some recurring numbers come up during the runtime. The most obvious and frequent ones, of course, are 2 and 17. The classroom is comprised of 18 students and 1 teacher. 2 people remain, 17 vanish. In one of the less subtle moments of the movie, Josh Brolin's character Archer dreams of an assault rifle bearing the time of 217, which we'll return to because there's a pretty obvious allegory regarding mass shootings specifically within schools. Archer is searching for his son Matthew, which combined with 217 has its own interesting biblical connection. The verse Matthew 2:17 in the New Testament refers to the massacre of innocents, where King Herod orders the execution of children. There's more here when you look to numbers and their association with Wicca. 2 is normally tied to duality and balance. 1 relates to control and gaining personal power, while 7 represents intuition, consciousness, and the moon. The other major numeral is the number 6, featured prominently on the bell used by Aunt Gladys, which is presented alongside an inverted triangle. Now, you can look at this and surmise that the triangle typically representing 3s alongside the number 6 is a tie-in to 666, often used as an omen of the devil's presence in Christianity. I think, however, there may be a separate meaning, though, when looking at triangles and witchcraft, which often represents power and evocation, with a downward triangle specifically tied to the elements of water and earth. two things we always see in the casting of the spell: a bowl of water and a branch of the blackthorn tree Gladys travels with, which we'll come back into in a moment. The other possibility is that the triangle bears a resemblance to a harp, an instrument that features heavily in the score of the film, presented repeatedly in sixes. The song acting as Gladys' rendition of the modern retelling of the Pied Piper, leading the children away from their homes. The blackthorn tree is another interesting addition with very neat ties to witchcraft. In Druidic witchcraft, the tree was typically used to craft wands, talismans, and stars due to the energy they were thought to contain. We get some other interesting background details in the movie, such as Miss Gandy teaching her class about parasites, and Principal Marcus and his husband watching a documentary on cordyceps, a parasitic fungus capable of altering behavior in some insects, mirroring the spell placed over the class and the parasitic nature of Aunt Gladys, who we learn is controlling and leeching off her victims in an attempt to survive and maintain her youth. There's also a fun and unusual detail here that seems to have caught the internet's eye. In the same scene, the couple are planning on splitting 7 hot dogs between the two of them. The number of hot dogs isn't a deeper connection to witchcraft, but instead a reference to the sketch from Krieger's show, The Whitest Kids You Know.
7 hot dogs?
7, yeah.
A day.
Is that high?
Which is one of a couple Easter eggs related to his prior work. Before the movie's release, the in-universe website MaybrookMissing.com included news stories about the events of the movie, along with a story covering the events of Barbarian, setting both stories in the same universe. Also, importantly, including a recipe for the hot dogs featured in the scene. Continuing with plot, Weapons really relishes just how bizarre it can make things, especially the last act of the film, and especially those final 5 minutes. All the primary characters wind up at Alex's house, where his parents and the missing children have all been paralyzed by Aunt Gladys's spell. Following intervention from the two main protagonists, Archer and Miss Gandy, Alex is able to break the spell and send the 17 kids after Aunt Gladys, going through houses, crashing through windows, and chasing her through the neighborhood before they begin literally ripping her apart in an extremely grotesque manner. I was surprised that the movie basically ended there, giving us a hopeful bookend narration for the well-being of the kids, but then again, there's no easy way to mentally move on from seeing an elderly woman's body ripped to pieces. The final thing I want to discuss is the film's commentary on school shootings and whether or not it's successful, because this has been a topic many people have rightfully been discussing. I previously mentioned the not-so-subtle nightmare scene where the allegory is really thrown in your face and seems to be the most criticized element of the film, even by people who really enjoyed it. Krieger has stated that the assault rifle was supposed to be more subjective and that he wanted the audience to decide what it was supposed to mean, but it's hard to interpret it as being anything else when the film is steeped in parallels to mass shootings, the sudden loss of a large group of children all from one class, the trauma impacting an entire community, the senselessness, the complete lack of understanding. Those are common feelings after tragedies like shootings which come out of nowhere. I think the portrayal of the parents in particular really served the allegory, and I didn't need to see a literal assault rifle on screen to understand the message, but I also don't think it diminishes the point when it's handled generally so well. From scenes of parents trying to find some solace from the police to, yes, the assault rifle, I think it works quite well, even though guns themselves are not present really at all in the story. And of course, in the real world, there isn't a fantastical witch who you can rip apart to solve your problems. I'm glad to see such an original idea receiving the attention it rightfully deserves and getting people into movie theaters, especially when so many bigger budget movies like Superman and Marvel's 2025 offerings, which could have been billion-dollar successes only a few years ago, are earning about half that. I'm not implying that the movies are failures or that blockbuster cinema is dead, but clearly audience tastes are changing from where they were a decade ago. An IP alone can't carry a movie anymore. Studios need to give the general audiences a reason to pay for a ticket, and I hope that with the popularity of original stories like Weapons, studios will take more risks in an effort to get people back in theaters. Anyway, that's all for today. I want to give a special thank you to Zach for work on this script. Zach, of course, helps with many of the film scripts on Eckhart's Ladder and also is the man largely behind the Professor X channel. For those who don't know, we upload long videos almost daily on Marvel, DC, pop culture, and more over on Professor X, so consider checking that out. And today's video is also related because it's about Zach Krieger's DCU pitch for a new Gotham City project. Linked again on screen and down below. I'll see you next time. May the Force be with you.